Welcome to Australian Hiker, your online hiking resource. We're your hosts, Tim and Jill Savage.
This is episode 126 of the Australian Hiker podcast. And in this week's episode, we catch up with Lucy Barnard from Tangles and Tail as she makes her way from the bottom of South America to the top of North America in an epic journey across the length of the world. Now, for those of you that haven't already listened to episode 108, it'd be worthwhile listening to that one first, just to see what the trip was about and what she's actually doing. And this episode will catch you up on the previous 4.5 months as she's just about to leave Peru and head into Ecuador. We hope you enjoy. Okay, so it's now been about 4.5 months since we've talked to Lucy, and the last time we talked to her, she was approximately around about halfway through, 2/3 of the way through Peru. Now, as we catch her up to her 4.5 months later, she's in San Ignacio, if I've got my pronunciation right, approximately about 50 kilometres from the border. So welcome to the Australian Hiker podcast again, Lucy.
Thank you. It's great to be here again.
All right. So, what have you been doing in the last 4.5 months? What's been the highlights? What's been the lowlights?
Peru has been really exceptional. I was just thinking about it as you were talking. I've really walked through a lot of different areas and a lot of different environments. So I started in the desert, and as I left the desert, that's just after I'd spoken to you, I started to climb into the mountain areas, and to get up there I had to pass through some really interesting sections that were full of this sandy powder, kind of like talcum powder, to get up high. And that's where I started to experience altitude sickness. So that was the first time I've ever experienced that before. And having to manage that was a real mind game, because I just thought it came down to my fitness, because I'd been walking on flat land for so long in the desert. So that was a real challenge. And after about a week or so of getting into that area, it was the first time that I passed a river with trees and grass for probably 6 months. So
I think I remember that photo, actually. I think there was one photo there. I'm thinking this is almost like Australia, the way it looked.
Yeah, and it was so nourishing just to hear water running and wind. It was a really amazing moment, because I didn't realize how dehydrated my mental state was after trekking through the desert. And people are so lovely in the desert, and there's a great community, and it's beautiful how you go into these towns and there are these eruptions of life, and there are farms and fruit trees and all sorts of things. But then as soon as you leave the town, you go back into this desolate environment. So arriving and having my first week following a river was really cleansing. So that was an absolute highlight. And I stopped and spent some time next to some waterfalls, because I just wanted to sit and feel like I'd survived something really hard and enjoy it.
And how did Wombat appreciate that?
Well, the thing that's interesting is he's only just now getting comfortable with swimming in water. And the reason, obviously he hasn't had much experience with water, so now he just goes insane when he sees sand, because he thinks that's really fun to dig in. But he's just not an experienced swimmer. So I have a little backpack that he carries, and he with him he takes things like spare clothes for him for when it's cold, and he'll take a few bits and pieces, like a inflatable mat that he can sleep on. But it also is a bit in this backpack's like water resistant. It's not waterproof, but it provides like a flotation device for him.
Yep.
And so every so often he'll jump into a river and he'll swim with that on, like he's got floaties on, and he just loses his mind once he gets out of the water. That sensation on his skin just sends him bonkers.
Yeah, I suppose as you say, if you're not seeing a lot of reasonable water bodies, it's probably not, I suppose most Australian dogs tend to end up loving water because they're around it so much. But given the fact you've been in the mountains and the desert, water's probably not as big a bigger thing.
Yeah, he was really nervous about it for quite some time, but now he's right into it. And so we left that area, and I started heading up a little bit further, where I reached my first 5,000 meter region. And, there was one day where I think it took me 10 hours to do 14 kilometers, just all uphill. And it wasn't that steep. It's just when you're at that height, there is half the oxygen available. So you have to breathe twice as hard, and your body over the day gets completely depleted of oxygen. And so at night you feel quite unwell, and it almost is as though your batteries recharge over the evening while you're breathing and getting that oxygen back into your system. So I would feel okay in the mornings, but there were a few nights where I was a little bit nervous about my health. And at the same time, I'm surrounded by these snow-capped mountains, and it's so different to be able to walk in the daytime, whereas in the desert I'd had to walk in the night because it was too hot. So having fresh water sources and greenery and snowy mountains was a real delight. And I continued for a little bit in that fashion, and then I switched from using a hiking trailer into having a backpack, which really liberated me a lot because it meant that I was able to follow some old Incan trails which are full of stairs, and sometimes the trail disappears a little bit for some time and then you find it again. And that's probably been the highlight of my entire trip, following the Incan Trail. It's beautiful, and towns aren't so far away that you're uncomfortable with having heavy load. And just recently I've then descended. So I'm now at I'm under 1,000 meters again, and I've walked into the jungle. So I'm now in an environment where it's hot, it's humid. I thought it was green before, but now it's really, really green. There's lots of water around. But then also there's mosquitoes and like annoying things, and hot in the day again. So I have to start early and walk later in the evening because, I can push through, but I have to be really responsible with Wombat, and he really is unhappy walking through hot days.
Yeah, I must admit, we did the Salcantay track in Peru in 2006. Is that the Morning Bell, is it? Or
there's a church. It's 10 to 7. Time to get up, everybody.
We found that we walked up near the base of Mount Salcantay, so we were up around about the 5,000 metre mark, and within half a day we were back down in the jungle, and it was tropical and steamy.
Yeah.
So
amazing. And you really see the change. I'm covering about 30 kilometres a day, and in that window there is a definable difference between being up in the fresh, cool nights, where one night I wasn't warm enough and Wombat and I were snuggling, and then the next night I didn't even take my sleeping bag out of its bag because it was just too hot.
It's I think that's the thing. I must admit, I have a real issue with altitude. Once I get over about 3,500 metres, all the energy just disappears. And as you say, it's sort of downhill, I have no problem whatsoever, but going uphill, I slow right down.
Me too.
And it does make it hard. It's sort of, the distances aren't really the issue. As you say, it's the lack of oxygen. You just
it's so weird. It's like you're a smoker. I've never been a smoker, but I imagine that is what it would be like. And it really irritates me because I'd read the statistics and it says something along the lines of only 12% of people are affected over 3,000 and only half over 5,000. And I haven't met a single person who isn't affected at the 3,000 meter mark. It makes me wonder who they're investigating. They're probably Peruvians who've lived in the mountains their whole life.
I must admit, when we did do South America, that we were both fairly badly affected, and I was having hallucinations. The dreams were bordering on hallucinations, and after the next morning I was fine, but I found that the next time I did those sort of altitudes in Bhutan, we drank a lot more water, and that made a huge difference.
And I find, for me, and for Mum, when Mum came and visited, this really helped her. Drinking juice, I don't know what it is, if it's the high sugar content and how it affects your body, but I find that I get almost immediate relief from drinking juice.
Yeah. It's as you say, you're lacking energy because of the oxygen, so getting energy from some sort of source certainly seems to help. So
yeah.
All right, so you're saying you're down pretty much now out of the really serious mountains for the moment?
Yeah, well, for the next 2 days I am.
Yeah.
And then I enter into Ecuador, and it makes Peru look like a kindergarten for hikers.
Yeah.
I'll be graduating from an average of 4,000 meters, and the peaks that I'll be passing through Ecuador, they're not just high. I mean, they're above 5,000, but also I have to there's one day where I'll be dropping 2,000 meters across the 30 kilometers. So I expect that it's going to take me a little bit longer to get through Ecuador than I've planned. The terrain is a lot more severe.
And I must admit, you tend to hear of all these South American countries, and as I said, I've been to Peru, but for some reason, Ecuador always has these pictures in my mind of being a more remote sort of country. Is that the case, or is it just that it's just not as well known as Peru and a lot of the bigger countries?
I think that's it. I think it's probably just not as well known, not as well travelled. But I'm really fortunate in that there have been some people in Ecuador developing 2 trails. They're both for cyclists, but one is for people who are happy to hike with their bike, because it's a single trail that's quite difficult. So I'll be able to follow that trail, and there's another trail I'll be able to follow, which is its easier brother, they call it. And the photos that I've seen coming off of these trails have me really excited. They're just so beautiful, and I think Ecuador is probably going to be a real hot up and coming for hikers and cyclists alike.
Oh, that's good. It's good to hear. It'll be interesting to talk to you once you've actually been through Ecuador and see if it pans out like you thought it would do.
Oh, I hope so. I only have 3 months through there, and then I don't have any trails that I know of to walk through in Colombia. So it's kind of bittersweet. I'm really excited, but also a little bit sad that I'm going to have to probably start hiking on roads again.
Yeah, I was going to say, will you? And is that going to be with a backpack, or is that you're going to get the trailer back? Okay, well, that's good. Okay, so over the last over the last 4 to 6 weeks, you've had a companion with you, and I believe he's a media person, is he?
Yeah, he's an adventurer photographer. His name's Dan Taylor, and he came because he wanted to get some photos of my expedition, help me with record keeping, and also to put together the beginning of a film, which would be really great if we can get this documented in a nice and beautiful way like that. But of course, I have to be able to get him back here. So we're looking at getting a collection of people to come when they're able to collect footage.
All right. And is he now gone, or are you back by yourself again, or are you?
Yeah, and it was so nice having him walking with me. So I've had 2 friends recently come and walk alongside me, and one friend was just not as fit as he thought he was, and a lot of that was to do with altitude. But I mean, it was a bit of a disaster, to be fair, because he wasn't able to carry any food or shared equipment, so it meant that it ended up being a lot more work for me. And it just kind of like, we still had a good time, but it just wasn't what the expectation was. And so when Dan said he was coming with all of this camera equipment, I just thought, I'm not going to be able to help you because I'm switching back into my backpack. This could be a real nightmare. But actually, he's really fit, really motivated photographer, and not, like, yeah, he did get an injury and he did take a few days off, and he was really willing to hitch forward when he needed to, which was great because he doesn't speak any Spanish. And it really re-inspired or gave me back some faith about being able to walk with people, because you've got to keep in mind that I do some really big distances, and people that are hikers but not seasoned long distance hikers have a really hard time, let alone people that want to bring extra gear. But it was great, and now that I'm on my own again, it's not as fun. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right there, and I think even people that are experienced hikers and experienced long distance hikers, the fact you've been walking for so long, you get up, you're going to be doing roughly 30 kilometres tomorrow and the next day, whereas someone flies over, they're a bit jet lagged, it takes them a little while to get used to the local environment, and all of a sudden, I'm doing 30 kilometres straight up. So
yeah, exactly. Well, we dialed it down for the first few days for both of them. But I think also, like, I have problems with visas. I have to make the distances. There's no way around it. And so for both of them, I had said that you're probably going to have to hitch forward. But yeah, I mean, I think in the future, if I have people come and walk with me, they just need to be professional adventurers.
Yeah,
because it's not fair on them, Like, Dan had a great time and he is really seasoned. And for my other friend, Jace, he just didn't have as good of a time as he could have if it was a hiking holiday where you can go for 3 days and then go and hang out in a hostel or do something different.
Yeah, I think I suppose that's it. It's for them. It's a holiday. For you, it's a life experience. And you as you say, you've got a certain time frame. You've got to be in and out of countries, and you can't afford to take too much time off or slow down too much.
Yeah, exactly. And I've got a different budget as well. So for my friends, I've now said to them, well, it's a good lesson learned, because from now on, you all can come and visit in a town where we can eat and enjoy each other's company without the stress of the hike, which I'd prefer to do anyway.
It'll be interesting to see how you go once you get into the States, and depending on which trails you do in the States. And I know at one stage you were talking about doing the Pacific Crest Trail, and certainly the once people get towards the end and getting up into Washington and Seattle, they're doing sort of 40-mile days,
which is insane.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't do that. I do 30 kilometers, and maybe it's because of the hill climbs that, like, maybe it's the terrain that affects that. The only time I've done really big kilometers, my biggest day I think was 60k, something like that.
Yeah.
And it was only because I had to get into town so that I could get meet a truck driver to get me back to Santiago so that I could meet my mum for a holiday. Otherwise, I just find anything more than 35 kilometers, maybe 40, is miserable.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
I think it's not so bad if you've got good scenery and it's flat and it's easy terrain, but you typically don't have that all lining up in one go. All
Exactly.
right. So you're roughly around about the 40, 45 kilometres from the Peru border. So
Yes.
when do you expect to sort of leave Peru? The next day or two, or?
Yeah, so it'll take me 2 days to get there. Tomorrow I leave San Ignacio, so I'll do my normal 30 kilometres, and then I'll start nice and early. There's a town right at the border, so I want to get there with enough time to eat a nice, good meal. And then depending on how long it takes me to get through that border will determine if I can get to the first town on the first day or if I need to take a bit of extra food with me.
Right. Now, how long do you expect to spend in Ecuador? You're saying roughly about 3 months, was it? Or
Yeah, I have got some mixed information. So I visited Ecuador with my mum over Christmas. And that means that I've then depleted some of the time that I'm allowed annually.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so I might get 75 days or they might give me the full 90. I hope they give me the full 90. But I will definitely be through Ecuador before the New Year.
Okay, so Christmas out of Ecuador or Christmas?
Ooh, I'll be cutting it close. I'll probably be on the border Christmas Day, not understanding why there's no one there to process my visa.
Yeah, it's always good when that happens. It's like, oh, there's a border post, but there's no one here.
Yeah.
So from then, so roughly 3 months in Ecuador, and then you expect to be in Colombia after that as the next stop from there?
That's it. And it's the same distance to get myself to Panama as Ecuador. So I've budgeted 3 months for each. But because the hurricane season is approaching in Central America,
Yeah.
I'm really trying to push through and get both those countries done faster if possible, because I really don't want to get caught in bad weather in Central America. I don't think it's going to be so bad in that I should be able to get from town to town almost daily. But I really just don't enjoy walking in the rain.
No. Yeah, it's you don't mind doing it for a short period, but for a period of a couple of months, yeah, when you're getting high winds and torrential rain, it's not particularly pleasant. So
no, and hot, like it's just the whole catastrophe. No thanks.
How's your fitness going overall? It sounds like you're still maintaining a good pace and no major issues at all.
Not really. I mean, changing from the hiking trailer into a backpack, I certainly noticed that I had to build up my muscles again and get used to standing with a good posture in the backpack, because that's an easy bad habit to develop.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I seem to be going quite well. I don't want to jinx myself, but everything seems to be holding up the way it should be.
And Wombat's holding up as well?
Yes, he is. I've noticed that around day 5, he'll throw a tantrum and want to have a day off. And then if I take a day off, he'll throw a tantrum because he wants to be walking. So, I mean, he's really super fit, but he's also really intelligent, and he knows how to push my buttons. But he's also just recently learned a trick where if he just collapses in front of a restaurant and refuses to move, the people in the restaurant come out and tell me that it's because he's tired and hungry, and then give him free food. And so now it's just like having an embarrassing child throw a tantrum. When we pass restaurants in the middle of nowhere, he'll do that, and people just look at me like I'm this cruel woman dragging this dog past their shop, and I'm like, no, he just knows that you have food.
And I believe from looking at one of your posts, he's learned another trick about hide the dog bowl.
Yes, I've got a beautiful photo coming out on Instagram tomorrow with a really nice photo of him running off with the bowl. It's annoying because it's hard for me to get different bowls that fit nicely inside my pot, and then I can pack it well inside my backpack. And I know that one day he's going to run off in the morning and hide the bowl, and I'm going to forget to look for the bowl, and then we're going to be down or sharing, which, yeah, it's funny and fun and cute, but it's also really irritating.
Well, I suppose it's a bit of humour from his perspective, and
yeah, definitely. Yeah. That a sense of humor is definitely something he has.
How are you going mentally? I mean, you said you've had a few people been hiking with you, but are you still coping? You're still happy you're doing it? You're not getting ready to give up, or?
Yeah, no, totally. Right now I'm doing well. And I have learnt that those moments where I do want to give up is because I'm doing too many kilometres or I need to take a day off. So I kind of see those signs earlier now. And rather than trying to push through, I don't. I will take a day off at the next town and treat myself to some good food. It's kind of amazing because you think I'd be bored um, or want to move on to a different project or something. But it's really become a routine now. And I think a big part of that is that people really get on and comment on my photos and tell me about their kids who love watching. And I think that really helps keep me topped up. So I don't really get depleted so much anymore with my attitude and approach to the hike. But I say that, who knows what's waiting for me in Ecuador?
Yes. I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? It's sort of you tend to think of South America as being one big country, and it's like, you know, there are so many different cultures, and
Yeah.
and the attitude to women in those countries tends to be a bit more 30 or 40 years ago from a Western perspective. So
Yeah, definitely. And also, I should say that I've been really lucky with access to the internet so far. And the rules while I've been in Peru have changed. So you can't just, as a tourist, get a SIM card with the companies that have good internet anymore. And so it was very fortunate that I was able to get one before that rule changed. And I don't know how easy it's going to be for me to get another SIM card in the next countries. And I would imagine that if I don't have access to internet, that will change in my mental fortitude
yeah.
going forward, because I really do rely on being able to check in with family and just have that constant contact. And without it, I think it'd be a lot more difficult.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting. I must admit, when I do long solo hikes, I realised last year when I did the Bibbulmun track, 35 days, I probably spent about a total of 9 hours talking to people over that period.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it gave me the opportunity to think about the woes of the world and where I am and what I'm doing. And it at no stage was like, that was only 35 days. It's not the sort of length of time you're talking about, but
it's still significant.
Yeah, it's the luxury of having time to think, which is something we don't normally get in a modern world. So
it's interesting. I mean, I read that you prefer walking or hiking on your own, and for me, I really get a lot of my energy from other people. I'm textbook extrovert. So I think, and now that I've walked with someone who is compatible with my walking style, that's probably broken me a little bit. It'd be really nice to have some more people to walk with, but then the stress of that and running out of time on my visas is also a whole nother beast. So I don't know. For me, having that contact's really important. Whereas I think for you, you probably really do well from having time just to reset.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's no doubt about that. And I do enjoy hiking with my wife. But I enjoy the both types of hiking. So, and as you say, you've because of the constraints you're under, getting someone that matches your hiking style, that's the critical thing.
Definitely.
And that's always hard. Getting someone that's not trying to drag you along, or you're trying to drag them along, and it's a hard thing to try and get that ideal match.
Yeah, just like any kind of teamwork, there's always a risk of getting somebody who brings that down the attitude of everybody because they're a whinger. Or I really don't like hearing someone say I'm not a morning person, because I feel like people take that and use that as an excuse or for leverage. And I mean, it's just like, mornings are hard for everyone, and I really don't like it when you've got to drag someone mentally with you. That's tough.
How's all your gear holding up? Is it, I noticed you've got a you've got a new pair of tights, which I
don't. They're kind of getting a little thin, and I'm a little bit desperate for a new pair. I only have 2 sets of clothes now, so that I carry with me, which means that everything's getting really worn thin. So I need to get another pair pronto. But I have been really lucky recently in that I've switched into a Z-Pax tent and pack.
Yep.
And the weight difference, I mean, when I was in Argentina, when I first started, I had about 30 kilos in my backpack, sometimes 35, because
that's a lot for a guy, let alone for a woman. So
and I was so inexperienced, so green. I didn't know how long my fuel would last. Like, I was playing it safe on so many levels that I was really overdoing it with what I was carrying. And now my pack is probably 10 kilos lighter.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I've always been heavy set, in the sense that I'm built to be strong, and I'm really grateful for that. It's quite, I'm fortunate. But also I'm like, how did I carry that much weight in my backpack when I first started? I must have been so fit, and now I'm just like, oh, what else can I get rid of? Do I really need this tripod?
Yeah. I think that's it. You soon decide whether you really need something or not, and it's hard sometimes. I mean, sometimes you're tempted to think, oh, I haven't used the first aid kit for a while, so I'll get rid of that, and sometimes things that you may not need but might need in an emergency. It's like,
totally. No, I will always carry my first aid kit, but certainly I still have 2 luxury items, which is my diary.
Yeah.
And I wish I had bought one that was more light than the one that I have, and my tripod. And it sounds silly that I'd be umming and ahhing about it, but recently, having dropped, I think, 500 grams just from being able to get rid of some winter items, the difference is phenomenal in how you manage your days and how comfortable you are.
Yeah, and it's one of those sort of things, I suppose, where if you're carrying the luxury items and you're willing to accept the weight, that's the criteria. But you do, as you say, when you're walking the distances you're walking, it's like you really do look at things closely, and you've been doing it long enough to say, well, I don't need this, or I do need this, and jettison as you go. So.
Yeah, and I'd like to have a body at the end of this, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, well, particularly as you head in towards Alaska, and even summertime in Alaska is not particularly warm. So
and I need to be there in winter to be able to finish, which sounds, I mean, I'm really excited about it. It's going to be a fabulous experience, but it's also going to be really hard.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Okay, so we've gone through and looked at all those sort of aspects. You as you say, you're looking at replacing some gear. I mean, are people still sending things over to you, or are the sponsors still looking after you, or?
I mean, I tend to. Everything is sorted right now. The things that I need to change over, though, are my shoes and my clothes. And so I just wait until somebody writes to me and tells me that they're coming over and that they wouldn't mind bringing something to me. So I have one person coming in November and another person coming in December. And that should just get me through with my shoes. I've got another 600 kilometres left on the current shoes that I'm in.
Yep.
So it gets really tight. And actually I can see that there are going to be times when I will change shoes, even though it's not quite necessary, purely because it's better to do that than to deal with the horrors of shoes that are no longer suitable.
Yeah, better off getting rid of them early than And, when can you get the replacements? And that's, particularly at the moment when you're in South America, and you do have to rely, at least once you hit the US, you'll be able to, you'll be passing through towns, or you'll be able to access REI or all the other outdoor stores.
Oh, heaven. Yeah, now I just, I don't fret about it too much because things usually work out. But that said, I really am putting my faith in the kindness of strangers, and people have been wonderful when they write and they tell me that they're going to be coming over to Colombia, for example, and what do I need? To me, that's just, I'm so grateful for when that happens because it does make a big difference. It really does.
So over the last 4.5 months, what's been the highlight for you?
I think having been able to step onto the Incan Trail over here has just been a marvelous experience. And honestly, I will be coming back so that I can walk the Incan Trail in its entirety, not just the last section that I've done, because I arrived up in the mountains a little bit late intentionally because I had to persevere in the desert to save time for my visa.
Yeah.
And I think that experience of the shift between the desert and back into an area where it's lush and green and where there's a lot of water, and hearing the streams of water for the first time in such a long time was a really nourishing experience for me as well.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay, so I suppose that's the question I'll ask you now is, was there anything you'd like to say to people listening to this podcast that as in ways of encouragement or ways of thanks?
Yeah, look, if you're following already and you've been commenting on my photos, I can't always respond because sometimes I don't get into town for several days and I've got so much to do. But I do read all of those comments, and I think the community that have been helping me are the reason that I'm still here persisting. And if you're not following and you think that you'd be interested in this journey, jump online and find me on Instagram or Facebook. The people who are in the community are really lovely, and I think it's not just a matter of following my journey anymore, but it's becoming more of a group of people who are really worth interacting with.
Okay, that's good. That's yeah. It, as you say, it is hard. The joys of trying to deal with internet access, and particularly when you get so many people commenting. As you say, you've got limited time in town, and there's only so many hours in the day to do these things. So.
I feel so greedy because I take so much from these lovely comments. But also then in between logistics and catching up with family and getting the stories ready for the next week to go up onto Instagram while I'm walking takes so much time that I feel like I'm not giving back enough. But I really do appreciate it. It does mean a big difference for me.
Okay, that's good to hear. Okay, so we've been talking to Lucy Barnard from Tangles and Tail, and Lucy, as we said at the start of this episode, is just about to head into Ecuador to continue her journey, and we'll try and catch up with Lucy either at the end of Ecuador or the end of Colombia early in the new year. So good luck with the next leg of your trip, Lucy, and I hope it all goes well for you.
I'll talk to you at Christmas time.
All right, thanks very much.
Bye.
Okay, so that was our conversation with Lucy, which we recorded right at the end of September. And in fact, that she was starting back up again the day after we recorded this podcast. And that should have taken her to the border with Peru and Ecuador. And by now, she definitely should be into Ecuador continuing her hike. Now, there are a number of issues that she did raise, which we'd just like to touch on and talk about. And it's the sort of thing that most people never likely have to deal with or never even think about. But a few of those, in particular, thinking about the visa issue, She had a certain number of days that she was able to stay in Peru, and then she either had to fly out of the country, stay illegally, which is not really a good idea, or get herself in a situation where she could leave the country by the deadline that was imposed on her by visa conditions. So for most people, as I said, not usually an issue, but for those people that are contemplating hiking the long trails in the States, that is an issue that often crops up, that you've got a limited visa that you're able to access, and as much as you might want to take it slower or do more things, it's not always an option.
Yeah, and Lucy did say that she was visa driven, and by that she was saying that the distances that she had to do every day were real, and that they were to ensure she got from one side of the country to the other in a reasonable amount of time and within her visa arrangements.
Now, a few other things that Lucy raised. We're talking about wombat and wombat having to learn how to swim. And I think for most people who live in Australia, their dogs will come across water at some stage, and I don't think I've ever come across a dog that doesn't like water. But when you've been raised, or you've never actually seen water that you can swim in or access because you've been walking through deserts or mountains. So wombat obviously is coming to love water, but it sounded like a bit of a learning experience for him.
Yeah, I mean, kind of fun in a way, and good to see that he got into it. But yeah, it was a pretty unusual part of the conversation. I had a bit of a second take on that one.
Now, the other thing Lucy mentioned about wombat was two other things that she raised. One was about the tantrums, that I want to stop hiking, give me a rest, and then immediately followed by, why aren't we hiking? Let's go. So I think wombat obviously enjoys having a bit more control over what and how they do things, and I think it's good to see Lucy let him lead the way to some extent, but by the sound of it, having a small child. And she also mentioned that the throwing it a bit of a wobbly and lying down and looking like he's really struggling right in front of the restaurant because he knows he's going to get given free food. So yeah, it's always interesting to see how dogs in particular can manage to milk the sympathy from people that they come across. She mentioned the effects of altitude, and this is something, if you've never gone through and hiked at altitude, it is a real, or can be a real, issue for you. And and for those contemplating hiking Kilimanjaro or going to the Himalayas or going to the Andes in South America, it is something you do need to consider. And for us, the first time we ever were exposed to altitude was in South America in 2006, and it had a big impact on us. So normally there are things you can do to minimize the impacts, including taking drugs for it. But it's something you can't just turn up over there thinking, yep, it's going to be fine. It is a consideration. And in her perspective, where she's spending many months, particularly at very high altitude, doing long distances, it's something that she has to deal with as a matter of course.
Yeah, I mean, she was talking about climbing, up to high levels and then climbing down again, and going into Ecuador. She was going to be at around about 5,000 metre mark, and some days, over a 30-kilometre day, she would end up going down to 2,000 metres and presumably then up again the next day. So, that can take its toll too.
Lucy also talked about her physical and mental fitness, and by the sound of it, she's doing really well from a physical perspective. She's into the routine, she's into a rhythm, she's managing to maintain her fitness, and certainly the last time we talked to her, she had some illness issues, but this time it didn't seem to be as much of a problem. She did talk about her mental fitness, and as part of that, she does enjoy having the company of others, even if just for short periods, to bounce some ideas off. As we talked about during the episode, I do like solo hiking, but when I talk about solo hiking, I'm talking about 1.5 months at the most, not talking about a number of years, which is what Lucy's doing. So she obviously needs to have the interaction with people from time to time, and she does appreciate people coming and joining her. On the other side of that, she mentioned that she is in the groove of things. She's certainly supremely fit. She's been doing this for a while now, and having people join that don't have the ability to do the 20 to 30 kilometres a day that she's doing, particularly when it's combined with altitude, I think it's becoming a bit of a culture shock for the people that are joining her. So as she said, she really ideally needs to be hiking with professional adventure hikers who are on the same sort of fitness level as hers. Now that's obviously an extreme there, but it is something that's worthwhile considering. Whenever you go hiking, whatever your level happens to be, it's nice to have someone that has the same sort of hiking style and abilities that you do. You don't want to feel like you're holding them up. You don't want to feel like that they're holding you up. And it's nice to have someone who's an even sort of pace and for that matter, temperament that you have to make things flow a bit smoothly.
So I think for me, there are a whole bunch of things here. One is about the energy that you get from the feedback that she's receiving, and she talked about the social media comments and how important they were for her. The other aspect of, being fit and in your own element and being able to do it yourself. And then the other sort of component of this is really enjoying the company of others. The challenge being, though, that those others aren't as anywhere near as fit or as prepared. She's been doing this for a long time now, as she is, to do the distances, to appreciate the terrain that's coming and so on.
One of the things she also mentioned was the starting off with a heavy pack that she was saying. When she first started off, she had a 34 kilo pack. And while she did say she's reasonably fit and strong, that's a big percentage of her body weight. I have no idea how much she weighs, but she doesn't look like she weighs a huge amount to be carrying a 34 kilo pack. I don't want to carry a 34 kilo pack, and I'm sitting around about the 100 kilo mark.
So what is she now? What's she carrying at the moment?
She said she's carrying around about 10 kilos less, which is still a heavy pack, but given what she's doing and the fact that she really can't rely on finding things at a local store in South America, 24 kilos is still a heavy pack, and she is back to a pack again now rather than the cart that she was using for a while. But as she said, she's looking at any opportunity to remove things out of that pack and to reduce her weight.
And she, again, going back to her fitness, I mean, she is, very fit and very prepared for this activity. I'm sure it's still tough, supremely tough.
And she did actually say that when she first started off, it was playing it safe. She was carrying things just in case. And I think as you gain an experience, you work out that, all right, there are some things, you need to carry a first aid kit, which you may never, ever use. But do you need to carry 2 or 3 or 4 changes of clothing, or do you need to carry 3 or 4 extra days of food? Sometimes the answer might be yes. But carrying it because you think that's likely to be used rather than, just in case. And we talked about packing our fears in a previous episode. Okay, so that was our catch up with Lucy. As we said, we'll try and catch up with her probably towards the end of the year, by which stage she'll have finished Ecuador and be into Colombia. She thinks she'll take about 3 months in Ecuador and then 3 months in Colombia as she goes through there. But we'll try and catch up with her around the Christmas time to see how she's going on that one.
Yeah, it'd be good to wish her a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and hopefully she'll get that 90-day visa that she needs for Ecuador.
Now, if you go to the show notes for this episode 126, we'll have all the contact points where you can send her an email, talk to her on Instagram, follow her map, which she gets updated on a regular basis. And if you want to help out, there's options to do that as well. So, as I said, go to the show notes and we'll have all the contact details for that information as well. Next week's episode, episode 127, we're going to talk about dehydrating food for hikes. And again, we've talked about food for hiking in the past. Now we're going to look at how we go about dehydrating food, the pros and the cons, and hopefully from your perspective, help you decide whether it's something you want to get into or not. We've mentioned this before. Australian Hiker is able to be followed on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. And again, if you go to the show notes, we'll have the links to those just so you can keep up with the latest news from Australian Hiker. That's all for me. Bye for now.
And bye from me.